Good morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are joining us. I am Dr. Joanne Yanez, the Executive Director for the Association of Accredited Naturopathic Medical Colleges, and we are going to be hosting today a topic that has had a lot of interest, actually. We're really excited to be talking about this. Oftentimes, students come to us with lots of questions about what does practice look like? How can I be successful? How do I get my loans paid off? What does business look like as an ND? And today we have with us Dr. Jennifer Pierre. She is going to be talking to us all about those things and giving you some tips on what you can do to hopefully stack the odds of success in your favor. Before we begin, Dr. Pierre, just next slide. So just a little bit of housekeeping. So everyone here is in listen only mode for this webinar. If you do have questions during the course of the day, please use the Q&A function. So you'll see a button on the bottom of your screen that says Q&A. Please use that for questions. Don't use the chat so much, please, because it's harder for us to track who is answering what and what questions you may have. So please use Q&A. We are recording this, so recording will be sent out when we are done, probably sometime today or tomorrow. And if you do have any questions or issues during the course of today, or you think of something later, we're always available at info@aanmc.org. Next slide, please. So I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Pierre. Dr. Pierre is the founder and CEO of Genteel Nature Health. She has experience as a public health professional and physician for nearly 20 years with roles in health research, prenatal health education, and mental health. She specializes in women's health with the goal of improving reproduction outcomes and reducing health disparities. Dr. Pierre integrates her knowledge of medicine with public health by designing public health and wellness programs and provides medical advisory for nonprofits and corporate entities. She's co-author of Pathways to Her Rise, best-selling anthology for entrepreneurs. She was also on the WBDC and the Connecticut Lieutenant Governor with the Women Rising Award. She's really just a fabulous human being. I am so excited to turn over the stage to Dr. Pierre here and really looking forward to hearing some of your tips. So thank you so much for joining us today this morning.
Thank you so much to the AANMC and Dr. Yanez for inviting me to speak on this topic. I heard that there's a lot of interest, which I'm really excited about. I have so much to share today. I wanted to start out first just by talking about, who I am and why this topic is important to me. So a little about me, I graduated in 2015 from SCNM, now known as Sonoran University of Health Sciences. And after that, I moved closer to home. I'm originally from New York. I found myself in Connecticut, and which many of you know has a nice scope of practice for naturopathic doctors. And so my experience has been working at two practices in Connecticut, and I wound up managing one of them. And that led us into the pandemic, which is a very different world than we knew prior. And I transitioned the practice to telemedicine. And I did that rather successfully. We had no gaps in patient care, which was wonderful. And so going through those experiences as an employee working for someone, and then now going out on my own, I started my own practice in the middle of the pandemic in September 2020. So I have a lot of those experiences that I wanted to share. And I focus on women's health, reproductive disorders mainly, so PCOS, fibroids, endometriosis. So I could have spoken about any of those topics because I love them, but I decided I really wanted to focus on the business aspect and share with you things I wish I would have known before I went out on my own. And we all know that in naturopathic medical school, there is so much that we have to learn in this 4-year time. So business is a very small portion of that. And that's why, again, I wanted to focus on this topic. So I think that it's really important to have an entrepreneurial mindset when you're thinking about starting your practice. And um, I know that there's a wide range of people probably on this call. There may be people thinking about becoming a naturopathic doctor. There may be people currently in school and people who are about to graduate. So I'm going to tailor the conversation more so to someone who is at that state where they're pretty sure that they're going to start their own practice. So that could be you completed residency, or you just graduated and you're trying to figure things out and you're weighing the benefits of that. And what I wanted to say is when you are starting your own practice, understand that you are an entrepreneur first and foremost. And understanding that just because you were an amazing student clinician, and you have that part really solid, does not mean that you are ready for entrepreneurship. And I don't say that to be discouraging. I say that so that you know that you have to reinforce yourself with these skills so that you feel confident to not only be a practicing physician, but also to be an entrepreneur. And these are the disclosures for the conversation today. Everything is for educational purposes. And this is our agenda. So I'm going to start off, I started off already with a little introduction and why it's important to me and a little bit of my story. And I'm going to jump right into the business models and how I've structured this conversation. So I've broken it down into business models, entrepreneurship, market opportunities, and the future outlook of the profession. So I wanted to start out just with some stats, if you weren't familiar, that I think would be really helpful. So the naturopathic medicine outlook alone is projected to increase 10% each year. And that is mostly due to legislative progress that is increasing access to naturopathic doctors and the growing recognition of naturopathic medicine throughout the United States and Canada. And there are various factors for this, which is great. And I think that this is a great time for you to consider that as you're going out and understanding that naturopathic medicine is just one piece of the puzzle. Patients are really looking for our services, right? So because of that, you have to position yourself as an expert in your field. And we'll talk more about that in the context of entrepreneurship. So as I mentioned, we'll start with business model. So for many people, the first decision that you have to think about is what do you want that practice type to be? Are you going to be a solopreneur or are you going to be in a group practice? And one of the things that I really want to advise you, and this, I will repeat this again in the advice section, is that I believe, based on my experience and other practitioners' experiences and successful practices, that it's really important to either complete a residency or if that's not possible for you, because we know residencies can be limited in our profession, creating your own residency by working underneath another doctor who has lots of experience. I think this is incredibly important because when you're starting out as an entrepreneur, you are really not only not seasoned as a physician, you still need some of that experience to feel confident about yourself. But then now also you're in a situation where you're trying to learn to run a business. And those are two big, heavy weights that you're managing at that time. So why not get the experience that you need, feeling really comfortable and then transitioning into entrepreneurship? I feel it's really important. So the first decision is, how do you feel about, being a solopreneur or joining a group practice? And there's many different options. I mentioned before that I worked at 2 practices here in Connecticut. And what I saw in my experience is that there are 2 types of situations you can have. You can be an employee or you can be a 1099 contractor. And with a 1099, you have more flexibility. You can work with multiple practices. You're not tied to one, but you also don't have benefits. And so you have to think about, what are those benefits going to be for you? How are you going to get those benefits? How are you going to get health insurance? Are you going to pay into health insurance? So lots of things to think about. And then in terms of that as well is contracts. How are you really understanding the contract? Are you hiring a lawyer to understand the contract? Do you have a mentor who's giving you advice about contracts? And that's one of the things that I really wish I would have had. I wish I would have had a mentor throughout my process, throughout being in school and then graduating, and then someone to really show me the ropes. I had anticipated that the employers that I worked for would have had more of that. But honestly, in a lot of situations, especially being in a 1099 contractor situation, I had to figure a lot of that out on my own. So it's really important just to know, what is that practice type and how are you moving forward in that structure? And what are the things that you're considering in terms of contract negotiation? Now, the next piece is, how are you providing your services? So because of the pandemic, so many people opened up to telemedicine, but I will tell you, prior to that, I had always been interested in telemedicine. I had friends and colleagues from school who were interested in telemedicine, but I really did not feel confident in setting that up until the pandemic happened. Once I transitioned the practice to telemedicine, I had an EMR system that was already set up for video chat. So everything was built into the EMR. It was perfect for me. And in this conversation, I'm not going to name specific brands or EMRs, but you can contact me offline for more of a discussion about that. But you'll even see to this day on a lot of naturopathic groups, there's this discussion about what's the best EMR, and we'll talk about that more later. But I had an EMR that was already set up with a lot of the things I needed to see patients through telemedicine. And so that helped increase my confidence in that. Some people are very strict about, they know that they want to do brick and mortar. And as somebody who did that previously, I enjoyed it. But the transition to telemedicine for me was very seamless. And that really inspired me to have a new vision for what I saw for my business, Genteel Nature Health. So I have a strictly telemedicine model. And some people can do a hybrid where you have the brick and mortar, but you're seeing people across the country doing a hybrid model. And of course, following the laws and regulations on each state that you're interested in practicing in. What types of services are you going to offer? So we know as naturopathic physicians, we have training in so many different areas, and sometimes it can be difficult to brand yourself for one particular thing, but we have so many different options. And the other thing to think about is, are you going to focus on primary care depending on what state are you in? Are you going to specialize in a particular area? So for me, being in Connecticut, had this great scope of practice. I was able to do acupuncture at one of the practices I was working at more so. And then in the other was strictly more primary care. And that gave me a feel of what I enjoyed, what I liked doing, getting really strong in my diagnosis and treatment. So that was a great situation for me. Also, if you have another skill set, meaning another career that you had prior to going into naturopathic medicine, bring that to the table. In my intro, in my bio, you understand that I have a career in public health, and I did that before I went into naturopathic medicine. So in terms of how I thought to set up a practice, all of those things are coming with me. How I think about the field of medicine in general, how I think about integrative medicine, naturopathic medicine, all of that, and public health and prevention is kind of like my, keynote whenever I'm thinking about things. So I bring that with me whenever I'm, working for someone or working for myself. Cash pay versus insurance. For some people, there isn't a choice. In certain states, you do have a choice on whether you're going to decide to do that. And I know in Arizona, where I went to school, it's pretty much a cash pay setup. Here in Connecticut, there's lots of insurance that covers for naturopathic doctors. So use that as a selling point if that's the route you want to go to. If you want to take insurance, use that as your selling point. Just to let patients know, obviously that helps spread the word about what we do to a larger population of people. But you understand that now that you're taking insurance, that there is a cap on how much you're going to get paid. And that is something that you have to consider. That was something I considered when I decided to transition off of an insurance model. But I think it's important to share that with your patients, because people assume that because we're naturopathic medicine and sometimes calling it alternative, that sometimes there isn't coverage, but that is absolutely not true. There's a wide, all the big payers cover naturopathic medicine in Connecticut, but also in other states as well. So that's a decision that you have to decide as well, because just because your state has insurance coverage, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the model that you want to do. I have colleagues that have a concierge style practice that's cash pay. Right now, I'm fee for service. So those are things that are great to consider as you move forward in deciding. And then something that I think that isn't talked about enough is billing. And that is something I had to learn myself on the job. Understanding all the codes, we start to understand that a little bit while we're in school as student clinicians, but it really is important for your payment and how to make sure that you're properly paid. Coding properly for your labs that you're putting out. One of the first things I learned when I was practicing was how to use certain codes to make sure your patients' labs are getting covered. That's something that is not really discussed, but that's going to affect the patient's experience with you if their labs are not getting covered or are getting covered. These are all the things that you have to think about. Are you going to have a biller, or are you going to do that yourself? I think as naturopathic physicians, we take on too many roles on our own, and we don't seem to really understand the value of subcontracting or hiring people who are really good at their jobs to take the load off of ourselves. I think because even in the nature of how we practice medicine, we study everything. We study what is learned in conventional medicine, and we study the naturopathic principles and botanical medicine and physical medicine, environmental medicine. We're learning all these things. So when we go into practice, it's like we're doing the same thing. We're trying to do everything for ourselves. And I can tell you from experience that that's not necessarily the best thing to do. You need to really, as you move into being an entrepreneur, focus on being a CEO. And I know in the beginning it can be very difficult, but learning what things you can outsource. And there's so many resources out there for people who can help you. And I'll talk more about that as well. As you're building your patient base, really think about who are the people you want to treat. I knew since I was in school that I loved women's health. I loved, I always joke, I love doing pap smears. Like that was, one of the things that I really enjoyed doing. So I knew, and I knew that I enjoyed challenging cases because it helped me really process everything that I was learning in class and just integrating everything together. I loved being able to figure out what was going on. And my supervising physicians knew that as well. So I tended to have the really hard cases. And I think that's something important to do while you're in school too, because now when you're out in the real world, you're going to get those complicated cases. As we know, we get 5 people coming in with 5 concerns, right? And we have to put the puzzle pieces together. So it's great to get that experience, but figure out who do you want to treat? What are the profiles of the patients that you like? And that will also help determine the style of practice that you want to do as well. Is that patient profile better suited to telemedicine? Is it better suited to a brick and mortar? If you're going to be doing certain therapies and injections, a brick and mortar is going to be the way to go for you. If you prefer to do more of a concierge, or there's a specific type of client or patient that you want to work with, then maybe telemedicine would be a great option for you as well, and then to expand your reach. Conferences are a great way to meet other doctors, whether that's other students, that while you're in school you could meet, or you can go to conferences to meet other solopreneurs, maybe even working together. I think that's something we don't do enough of, working together. And I know it's tricky out here, and sometimes there's a level of trust, obviously, that you have to have when you're working with someone. But one thing that I will say that I notice, and this is across different states, is I personally believe, this is me, that there's too many of us as solopreneurs and we need to be working together. It is very challenging to figure out all of this on your own, and you need help. And don't be afraid to ask for help. And we tend to be these lone soldiers out here just trying to figure everything out. And this is why we may see certain practices failing. There is hope in our profession of being successful. It's just that we're not approaching this as a business a lot of times. We're approaching this as, oh, I'm a physician, I'm going to go out there and start my practice. And we have to be really honest about the differences in practice and scope that is around the country, in the United States, and even in Canada. And because of those differences, allow those differences to be what sets you apart, and find other people who think like you and go into business with them as well. It's so much easier. And this goes across the board to so many other businesses and startups. Working together, if you have similar thought processes, similar patients that you like to treat, why not work together and just reinforce the ideals and the strengths that you have? And then lastly, mentorship and coaching. Again, I mentioned before that I didn't have as much mentorship. I had amazing supervising clinicians that I really felt comfortable working with. But after I left school, I didn't really have, someone I could say that I could talk to on a daily basis or weekly basis or monthly basis about business. That's very different than the clinical skills, talking about how to run your practice. And like I said, this is why this topic is so important to me, because I serve to be that for students I talk to and mentor, and even people just interested in the profession. Having someone who's been through it, been through all the models, like I said, working for other people and now working for myself, and just all the in-betweens and everything that I've gone through, and being able to share that with someone else. Coaching, there are many naturopathic doctors who are actively practicing, retired, or inactive, that have coaching programs that are set up to help students. And I wouldn't say students specifically, it's in general to help people build out their practice. And this is why I think it's really important to make sure that you are financially settled before you start your practice. If you are burnt out, if you really have no money, it's very difficult to start any business. And understanding that you're going to have to look at loans, and we're going to talk more about funding, you're going to have to look at these sources, because that's important too. And recognizing that coaching might be something that you start to do even while you're a student. Coaching can be something that you do right before you get started. Coaching is something that you continue to do. I continue to do that. So not only am I doing continuing education in terms of, what do I need to do for my educational credits, but I also continue to coach and learn under other people so that my business is even stronger. And specialty organizations. So we know that we have so many specialty organizations. I mean, from one of mine is the Endo ANP. There's the psychological associations, there's the gastro associations, there's so many. And I think that if you can get in early with one of these specialty organizations and really figure out what your niche is, that would be incredibly helpful for you in deciding how you're going to structure your practice. If you have an interest in something since you're in school, it's probably telling you the area you need to go into. And some of us are afraid to be niched because we learn so much and we have so much to share with the world and share with our patients that we don't like to niche. And it took me, I would say, 5 years to really decide to niche myself into endocrinology and women's health. But I knew that since I was in school, that was the area I really enjoyed. But I think when you do that, it gives you more confidence in that area to continue, sharing those things with your patients and finding unique ways to do it. I also mentioned that another helpful thing to do is we have Facebook groups that people are sharing information. There's lots of different ways to get the information you need. And that's why I stress the important piece of working together and learning from someone. Do not try to figure this out by yourself. Systems. If you don't get anything from this conversation, like if I leave this conversation and someone is like, that part about systems made me really excited and understand that this is something that I never really thought about, that would make my day. And I say that because, as I mentioned, I worked for 2 naturopathic practices, and the thing that was glaring for me was the lack of systems. And mind you, people can be very successful with systems, but then lose it all very easily without systems, right? Like not having systems, excuse me. And that was something that I noticed in both of the practices that I was working at. These practices did very well, made over $1 million a year, and had no systems in place, and ultimately led to their demise. And it's very frustrating when you see that, because again, that's the business aspect. It's not enough to have great doctors. It's not enough to, have a buzz. Ultimately, you have to keep bringing patients in. You have to keep putting structure into the business. So what do I mean by systems? So one of them, obvious one that we know about, is electronic medical records. Finding a good EMR system that helps you document all your patient information, helps you with charting, is fantastic. But it's more than that. It's having accounting software. And that's the business piece, knowing your numbers. Again, knowing your numbers. How much are you making? What is your cost of goods sold? You cannot price your services if you don't know how much you're making, or how much you're losing, your profit and loss. And when you have an accounting system, it can create all these reports for you. So you have like a moment in time where you can see where your business is at. Where are you losing money? If you start to do this early, you can start removing certain things out of your business that are costing you too much money. Sometimes people have services that are on subscription that, maybe it's a marketing thing, and you're not really getting any patients from there. Remove it, get rid of it. So having a good accounting software that's very simple, there's so many out there that are free of charge, to start looking at your numbers and get an understanding of what's going on in your business, because you have to know that. And things like having a virtual assistant, what is going to be more beneficial? Operations kind of goes in line with systems, and this is having standard operating procedures. This is another thing that I see a lot of practices don't have. How are you taking calls? How are you ordering supplements? How do you do inventory? Again, pricing. What is the structure of your pricing? Making sure that your front desk has all this information. And then marketing. I could go on and on about marketing, but I'm going to keep it very simple and say that you need to know your customer. Do not start off spending a lot of money on marketing. That was the best advice I was given years ago. You don't need to. You can go out there, start meeting people in your community, announce yourself as a naturopathic physician, share what you do because people are interested. Join your chamber of commerce so that they know that you're in the area, they know that you exist, and they can promote you. That's one of the first things that you can do. And now we move into entrepreneurship. The very first thing that you do when you move into your business is starting a business plan. Very, very simple. What do you want to do with your business? What are your goals? How much money are you trying to make? And constantly revisit that business plan as time goes on. Your business plan may change as things change, but your business plan allows you to look at who is your competition, who are the people you admire, what are the pricing in your area for how you now may choose to do pricing. So much information on there. What is your mission and vision? If you haven't done that already, you can do that while you're in school. What is your mission and vision for how you see yourself and how you see your business? Along with this is taking advantage with what's available in the community. There are so many free resources in the community. When I decided to go out on my own in September 2020, in the height of the pandemic, I reached out to the WBDC, which is the Women's Business Development Council in my region. I reached out to SBA, SCORE. These are all known as ESOs, entrepreneurial support organizations. And many of these services are for free. And again, the diversity in what we're doing, people want to know more about our medicine. They want to know more about preventative medicine. And just sharing what you do with these organizations is incredible. Accelerators and incubators. So these are situations where, as a business owner, you can be in a small cohort with others and get professional business counseling, again, for free. So participate in these types of things as a business owner. I've done 4 at this point, and this is where I learn a lot of the information that I am sharing with you today, and the information that has been helpful to my business. Funding. This is a big one. I mentioned earlier about how the market right now with interest rates is not, favorable for a new entrepreneur. So loans are one option, but look at grants. There's so many grants available nowadays for different types of businesses, healthcare businesses, women entrepreneurs, minority entrepreneurs, diverse entrepreneurs in different ways. Take advantage of that. And I put VC for VC funding. What is your exit strategy? Are you trying to build your business to then get to the point of selling your business, or are you just building your business for a certain amount of revenue? What are your goals with that? And please do not forget to incorporate burnout prevention. Burnout is real. It is not imagined. I've gone through it for so long, and there are certain things that you have to put in place as an entrepreneur, because your road may go like this. Entrepreneurial, the journey is definitely a journey, and there will be ups and downs, and that's guaranteed. That doesn't matter how much money you make, that doesn't matter how good things are, you will experience ups and downs. And so you need to factor in, what is your burnout prevention? When are you taking breaks? How are you scheduling breaks? How are you scheduling your work week for your patients? And then finally, market opportunities. What are some non-clinical careers that you may consider because you have this naturopathic degree? You can do so many things. You have a doctorate in a medical profession. So what are some of those non-clinical careers? We have nutraceutical companies that people do, the consulting, many different options, and the AANMC has a list on the website, not only of these specialty organizations, but non-clinical careers that you can consider as you're moving forward in your career. And then as we wrap up, I want to talk about, what I love about naturopathic medicine. I love that it is modern technology combined with the wisdom of nature. That is why I chose this profession. If some of you know my story, I was, like so many others, considering conventional medicine. And I just love that I could get everything that I wanted to learn about in one field. I love that we have so much knowledge about the human body, and combining the Eastern and Western perspectives, and our patients improve. Patients are asking for this medicine, and you need to be in a position where you're successful in doing well, so more people know about what we do and they get the preventative medicine that they need to improve the rates of chronic disease in this country and other countries. Practice freedom. The fact that I was able to go from working for someone else to have my own practice is a benefit of being a naturopathic doctor. Sometimes we feel like we're forced into that, but it really is a decision. Entrepreneurship isn't for everyone, and understanding that about yourself. And the colleague diversity. When I was in school, respiratory therapists, pharmacists, this wasn't a lot of people, this was their second career, like myself. So I love that we bring all those things to the table because we're so passionate about what we do. And then the diversity in specialties that you can choose from. What are my future plans? Well, I am looking to grow Genteel Nature Health. Right now, because I have the telemedicine platform, I took advantage of that and I see clients in different states. So that has been a great thing for me. And I see patients in Connecticut and Arizona, where I'm licensed. And I have a marketing strategy that I'm going to be starting this summer. So that's going to be wonderful to just bring in more patients and grow with adding more doctors and also a health coach component and continued business development. That's something that never ends, the same way you do your continuing education for school and your license. And then some of the advice that I have, I mentioned before: complete a residency or work for someone else first, generate some income before you start your own practice, partner up with a fellow solopreneur, and then speak to a financial advisor to really take a look at your assets, how much you're making, what do your finances look like before you start. I'll just leave you with, one of my personal thoughts about, like I said, about the profession. I feel like the outlook for our profession is great because people are asking for this, people want this, but we just have to position ourselves in a way so that people know what we're bringing to the table and what it is that we need. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your attention during this presentation. Feel free to reach out with any questions, and I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Yanez. I mentioned some of these things already.
Yes, thank you so very much. So this slide has Dr. Pierre's contact information if you want to take a screenshot, so you can connect with Dr. Pierre at another time if you would like. If you go on to the next slide. So we have some upcoming events coming up for AANMC. Next month, we will have a panel of alumni talking about all of the different ways that they use their naturopathic degree and how they have created various different successful tracks for themselves. And then in July, we're going to be talking about hair loss. And then in August, and I know it's not on there, we will be hosting Dr. Sophia McCarter on a topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion in naturopathic medical clinical delivery. And so really excited for some of our upcoming events and just thankful for you all to be here today. So with that, we're going to start to take some questions and answers. Dr. Pierre, would you be able to put back some of the entrepreneurship resources that you had
absolutely
discussed?
I'll leave this one. I think this is a great one.
Great, thank you.
So those are all well, not all there's so many entrepreneurial support organizations. And this is also a great source of where you would start to look for grants. Because of the pandemic, there's still a lot of grants out there. What I didn't put on here is Hello Alice. That's where a lot of people look for grants. They're out there. So don't necessarily think that that's the only way that you can get funds, is by getting a loan. Grants have been incredible for me, especially like I mentioned, I started my practice in the middle of the pandemic. And the grants were wonderful for me for little costs here and there, admin, marketing. The marketing that I'm starting is due to a marketing grant that I received.
Excellent. So there are a number of questions coming through. So one was the residency process, and there was a question regarding how long you should do residency, and I have a personal take on that. I completed a one-year residency way back in the Stone Age, and but ultimately residency is education, and any piece of education. And somebody also asked, Dr. Pierre, you and I both have MPHs as well. You did yours before, I did mine after my ND. But any education, whether it's a master's in public health, an acupuncture degree, residency, which is medical education, all of that should be supporting your career goals. And so if you are working and really want to hone your clinical skills in a specific area, residencies can be very valuable in doing that, especially if you're targeting a focused area like pediatrics, regenerative medicine, oncology, stand up, straight up, primary care. So, there are so many different ways that you can tackle that, where ultimately the length of the residency really is going to support your ultimate goals. And so I think that's all I'd have to say there, Dr. Pierre. I don't know if you want to add
I
in.
totally agree. I think it's about shoring up your skills as a physician. And like you said, it's education, it's experience, it's increasing your comfort level. There's lots of people, where they don't feel totally comfortable, by the time they graduate, and that's okay. So then do something about it, right? Like that's just like everything in life. The more we do something, the more comfortable we get. So I definitely recommend that. And like I said, if you can't, because it is competitive, there aren't as many, in our field, you can create your own. And that may sound daunting, but it's really not. Seek out a doctor that you admire, that you'd like to work with, and create your own. It's about getting the education, like Dr. Yanez stated.
Thank you so much. There was somebody who asked if you could just put your contact slide back up for a moment too, please.
Sure.
Thank you. So let's see. Can you provide a little bit of background on loans, business loans? And I know that there are lots of folks who will talk about business loans and so on, but maybe just if you could share a little bit about that. I think, people think about education loans, but they don't always think about business loans. And so, what do banks look at when they're when you're
Great
applying for
question.
business loans? What are some things that you can do to be successful in applying for a business loan? That would be fabulous to add.
Sure. So one of the first things that you do when you set up your business is setting up an EIN. And EIN is great because that gives you like your social security number for your business. So that's one piece. And then what you start to do is establish business credit. So the first thing that you would, that's the first thing. The second thing is establishing a business checking account, not a personal. Do not mix your personal and business. So setting up a business checking account, and that is where you're going to do all your business services through. Now, this can be done even if you are sole proprietor. So that means, let's say you haven't created your LLC yet. So you create your business account. They're going to ask you for, all the information of when you registered your business. So you bring all that to the table. And then at that point, that's when you can start establishing business credit, which is totally different than your personal credit. So when you go to the bank, establish a relationship with the bank first. You don't just go there asking for money from the beginning, right? You meet with the bank advisors. I know my bank manager. I know lots of people at the bank. Establishing a relationship with them where they know you, they know what you're trying to do. The banks that I work with, two banks, but one in particular is a smaller bank that I work with here in Connecticut, which I would also recommend. Go to smaller banks. Your chances of getting a loan are greater with the smaller banks. And so anyway, what you're doing is over time, you're establishing a relationship, you're talking to them, you're going into the bank, you're talking about your successes, you're talking about your failures, you're talking about all of that. And so they want to help small business owners, banks, smaller banks especially. So getting to know them, getting to know their products. So outside of a loan, and I'll go more into detail, but you can get something that's called a line of credit. And they give you a certain amount to work with, and it can be $5,000 or $10,000. And then once you use that and pay that off, that can be a better option even than loans because it's a smaller amount and it helps you establish some credit with the bank. They see that you can pay it off, and then the next time they give you more. And the interest rates on those are usually a lot lower. Sometimes they give you it for a really low rate for a short period of time, and usually it stays that way. I don't know what some other banks might do it differently, but it's usually much lower than the interest rates with getting a loan. Now, with getting a loan, they're going to be looking at everything, and they do look at your personal finances as well because they want to make sure that you are able to pay this off. The other thing is that you want to you have to show revenue, obviously. So they're not going to give you a loan if they don't think that your revenue is going to cover it. So it's very hard to start off asking for a loan. I would say you're in a better position to go for a line of credit, but I would also say don't be afraid to ask for a loan if you are getting in some revenue. You can take out a loan to buy equipment, and knowing that you can pay that off because you're doing a new procedure and you're going to be getting in a lot more patients for this procedure. So I think that's as much as I can get into in the context of this. But don't be afraid of loans, but establish a relationship first. And also, like I said, consider a line of credit before you do that, because it might serve your needs instead of getting a loan.
Thank you. The other thing I would add to that, credit unions can be very valuable.
Yep.
And often will beat local competitors as well. So the small banks / credit unions are a great way to go, especially as a small business owner. Their job often is to support that. And also some of the resources Dr. Pierre shared in regard to the business organizations will often also have suggestions or recommendations when looking into business loans. So lots of resources out there for you. And again, just like you think about loans for your education, loans for your business are an investment. It's kind of seed money to get you started, to get the initial setup. But that loan officer, they're going to ask you for your business plan. They're going to ask you for your marketing plans and strategies. Like they want to see that this investment that they're making, or VCs. And I know a few folks were asking, what's a VC? Venture capital funds, venture capital firms, basically are folks that pool their money together to invest in various different types of businesses. There are, med tech, venture capital firms. There are all sorts of VCs that exist. But essentially what you're doing is they're going to want to make sure that you've got a solid plan and you are a sound investment for them to make. So in naturopathic school, you have business courses, you have courses and resources available to you that can help you pull these together. And one of the frustrations I think that we hear from some of the faculty members is that students don't always take those resources seriously early enough on, where, it's a few weeks before graduation. Oh, shoot, I need to, pull together a resume. But, those are the types of things that frankly, you should be working on very early on in your naturopathic degree, is just starting to, when you have a few minutes here or there, go over to the alumni coordinator and ask for resources, or the career counselor at the school and say, hey, can I make an appointment with you to, tighten up my resume? Can I make an appointment with you to practice my interviewing skills? Can I make an appointment to role play or get information on attaining a business loan? You've got folks at the schools who are resources, and they always tell me that students are not taking enough advantage of them as they would want them to. And so I would also, in addition to the resources Dr. Pierre shared, I would share that all of the schools have resources for students, and they all do share that they tend to be underutilized, at least in the beginning, until folks realize, oh, shoot, this is something I've got to do soon. And then there's a scramble to try and get it done. And so the more you can be proactive, the more you can start to build your social media presence, your online presence. If you have a business name, lock it down, get the website, get all the iterations of the website, get the social media handles, lock those down. Even if you're not going to use it actively while you're a student, buy them, put them in your pocket, put them in your back pocket, and keep it there so that when you are ready, you're not first trying to figure out what your business name is going to be and then realizing that all of those names don't exist or they've already been taken. So again, there are lots of different areas where your school resources can assist you, and the resources Dr. Pierre has shared can be of a lot of help.
So I would totally agree with that. I think what happens is, as a student, because for me, it's like 8 years ago, so it seems like it just happened, but you're so overwhelmed, especially in your final year, that you're not really thinking about a lot of the things that you need to do except for graduate. You're like, I need to graduate. And if you're applying for residencies, it's overwhelming. But that advice about locking down the website is so important. And just thinking, I had the name of my business for like decades at this point. And luckily for me, when I locked it down, things weren't as crazy with social media and everything, but I had this name forever. So I knew what the name of my business was going to be. But you can be really proactive, even getting your EIN. You can get that at any time, and it's really easy to do. It's free. And you have the EIN locked down too, and then you don't have to register your business until a later date, but at least you have that. Dr. Yanez, you're on mute.
I was typing away, so I muted myself so you wouldn't hear all of this stuff. So there was a question about social media and how do is it necessary? I know you're laughing. So the laughter means 100% yes, necessary.
It is.
Yes.
I've struggled with this. So I always say I'm the XY generation. So I'm on the cusp. And so luckily when I was growing up, there was no social media. It was when I was in my 20s. So I have a love-hate relationship with social media. It's definitely necessary, but what I would say is I don't believe that you have to do all the things, right? I am not on all the social media. I'm not on TikTok. I started on TikTok and I was like, it just felt really young for me. And by young, I mean teenage young. I understand that it is grown, and I may revisit it again. But I feel like you need to find the social media that feels comfortable for you and stick with that. You can't do all the things. And expert advice that I've been given by different marketing companies. I interviewed 5 marketing companies before I settled on the one that I was going to work with, before I even had the money for the marketing companies, because that's how important it was for me. And a lot of the feedback that I've been getting is, yes, it's important, but you need a strategy. You need a strategy. So if you have your own shtick and like you're really good at social media and it's fun for you, then go ahead and do it. But if it's not fun for you, have someone else do it. Have someone structure a plan for you and what you're going to post. And I can tell you that the marketing company that I work with says that a lot of those, hey, this herb is good for this, that stuff doesn't really work. So I'm just sorry to burst your bubble. It doesn't really work well. It's you're using it to brand yourself and to brand your business. What do you stand for? What is that thing you're constantly honing in on? When I see people do it well, they're the people who have their specialties and they're constantly sharing how they help patients and improve their patients' health in that specialty. That's when I see people really successful. And most of the time, people aren't going to see your post unless you have a certain amount of followers.
So here's the thing about social
not
media.
to be discouraging, but there's a lot to that. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to post and everybody's going to see it.
Yeah, and remember, social media is a marketing tool. So it is a tool in the toolbox of your bigger marketing plan. It is one of the means. And so when you think about who is your target audience, so like Dr. Pierre said, TikTok is too young for her, but if you've got a pediatric office, then it isn't. And so, so the number one rule in marketing is define and know your audience. Who are you? And that is why some of the data we have around careers and naturopathic outcomes is folks who do specialize or who at least have a very clear business plan and target tend to do better because, at one point, are you targeting to everybody or are you marketing to everyone? It's going to be really tough to sell yourself and break through the noise if you're trying to be everything to everybody versus really knowing who you are, knowing what you do well, finding the audience that and the target patient population that really benefits from what you provide, and then just kicking butt on that, like really. So your social media presence should only be supporting your marketing strategy and who you're marketing and what they're looking for and all the other noise needs to go away. And
Absolutely.
so it's very much going to vary depending on what it is you're selling. Now, if you're a naturopathic doctor who makes most of their living through a nutraceutical company you founded and books that you sell, that's going to look very much different than if you have a telemedicine practice or a brick and mortar practice. You know, brick and mortar, you're really going to be looking for a very prescribed geographic location versus if you have a telemedicine practice and you are targeting folks in different states or different geographic areas versus if you're an author and you're selling books. So every single one of those types of examples, your marketing strategy is going to look very different. And so it really is know your audience, know who you are, know what you need to do to get in front of the people who are going to be your consumers, your patients, et cetera. So that really, I think, ultimately, and I know I kind of strayed from the social, but social is just a means to an end. It's a means for awareness. So that's that is a question. So Ashley was asking a question about social. How do you begin to build it as a student? Well,
oh, that's the best time. I always say I wish I would have done that when I was a student. Prior to, so some of my social media background is prior to becoming a student, I used to be a hair blogger. And when I went to naturopathic medical school, I was like, this is just too much. And at that point, I had Instagram, I had Twitter. Twitter was like, I really had enjoyed Twitter for a while. And then every time they change, they kind of just lose me. So being a student is perfect because what you can do is just chronicle your story as a naturopathic medical student. I mean, it's perfect. You're constantly having information that you can share. And I thought about it, but to be honest, like my first priority was getting out in 4 years because I had classmates who did not. So I didn't want any distractions. That's my personality. I prefer to focus on that. But now I think social media is just, there's so many different ways to do it that just share what your life is, share what your experience is. And that's just instant content. Like it's just so easy. So
I just popped a link, by the way, into the chat of a panel that we hosted of students a few years back. And one of the students created a YouTube channel that funded her ND education. So there are lots of examples of people who are monetizing social media. There are different ways of doing it. So I hope that answers. Ashley, it's, you know, we've only got a minute here left of the webinar, so there isn't a lot of time to get into that. But there is just so many different ways of, you know, either targeting social or, you know, focusing on all of the different things that you can do as a student, as a new doc, a new grad, to better, you know, hone yourself. So Haley has a question: how do I get better at navigating this? Well, get mentors, get folks who I know Dr. Pierre talked about this, but you need people start early, and you need people around you who are going to be honest. And a mentor doesn't have to necessarily be everything. Like people can have mentors for very fixed reasons. Like, you know what?
I don't have to be a naturopathic doctor.
You don't have to be a naturopathic doctor. You may have a mentor who is a lawyer. You may have a mentor who is a business person and who can help you navigate one area of things, like shore up. You know, so one thing that I will leave you all with is, if you haven't done it already, do your personality tests, do your Myers-Briggs, all of those types of tests out there, do them all. Learn about yourself, learn who you are.
I'll put this one in the chat. BOSI, I'll put it in the chat. You can do this online. It gives you like your entrepreneurial profile.
Yeah, so do all of those, preferably before you start school, and learn how you study, learn what type of personality you are, learn all of the different things, so that when you know your strengths and your weaknesses, and you can target the types of mentors that you need based on your weaknesses. So like if you know you're personally very strong in one area and not so strong in another, go get a mentor. Don't get somebody who can strengthen up the stuff that you're already good at. Get somebody who can balance out the areas where you're weak, or at least call you out on them, or provide resources and areas of ways that to strengthen yourself up there. So, you know, lots of different resources, but I can't speak strongly enough about getting your personality tests done, like know who you are, know the types of people who complement you well, especially if you are going to be an entrepreneur and hiring folks in a business, you want to have the right types of personalities that jive with you and support you as well. So all of that's kind of a big picture. I know we have thrown a lot of things at you today.
It's a lot.
And so I'm apologizing in advance because we have thrown a whole lot at you. So if you do have additional questions, Dr. Pierre, can you leave the info page, the last one, up, just in case folks have additional questions for us at ANMC, they know how to get to us.
Sure.
And I know we've tossed a whole lot of things at you. So I'm so thankful for you, Dr. Pierre, for joining us today. I know we do have to wrap up, but thank you all for coming today. Thank you for the questions. I'm sorry if we didn't get a chance to answer all of them. We tried our best. But thank you again, and best of luck to you all, the collective big U, as you navigate your life as an ND student and ultimately as a grad. So thanks for coming today, and I hope that this was helpful.
And thank you for having me. Best of luck to everyone, and don't be afraid to reach out.